Hello everyone. So in this video, I want to discuss about agency. So this video is related to the video about desire and the video about attachment. So it's related to the stories, of course, the stories that we are trying to remove, the stories intended as the second dart, as in the suffering, the judgment, the stories we tell ourselves. So I discussed a little bit about agency already in the video about desire, but it's an important topic, so it deserves its own video. So I think we have three main illusions, and of course they are sub-illusions, but three main stories, three main illusions, three main, I don't know, yes, I think stories is the right word, three main distortions, whatever we want to call them. Of course there are many more, but they are smaller, so this is the three big ones. So far I've covered desire, which usually is related to Ferrer 4 and 5. And it's the idea, it's a judgment about reality. It's the idea that reality should be different. It's the comparing between actual reality and an imagined reality which is different. And this is kind of a source of suffering. Then there is attachment. So usually it's presented more as identity, but it's really the same because I really always mention that attachment as attachment to identity. So attachment to a story we build around our identity or as our identity. So our identity is really a story that we build. We build this story and this story becomes who we are. And we put a lot of energy into defending this story. So when someone attacks this story, we feel like they're attacking us, and we feel we have to defend at all costs this. So this would be the attachment identity. So desire is the judgment of reality. It's a story that we create where we judge reality. And attachment are stories that we attach to our identity, but especially stories we make up about our identity, and we get attached to those stories. So yes, someone may renunciate, let's say, material stuff. So he says he's not attached to material stuff, but in reality he's much more attached to a new thing he has just created, a story that makes him believe that now he is a non-attached kind of person and he's maybe superior or he's better, he's special, or he's on the right path or whatever. So the true attachment is an attachment to the stories related to identity. Also to other stories, but in general, this one is very strong, the stories of identity. So of course I explained the one about desire, why it doesn't make sense, because at the end it's just a long series of events from the Big Bang to now, and I introduced agency there, so and there is no agency, so or at least there is no evidence that there is any kind of agency. There is no reason to believe in agency. Of course, we are not transforming it into its opposite, that is the absolute belief of no agency. But so far, there is really no evidence of agency. Just like if we don't believe in Santa Claus, we don't make it an absolute belief in the non-existence of Santa Claus. We just don't believe in Santa Claus. So in desire, I explained already in the video about desire that it doesn't really make sense to believe that there is kind of a part of our brain that is independent from causality, and so it can take those free decisions. It has free will, free from causality. It doesn't make sense. So those judgments, of course, are absurd. The judgments where we say it should have been different, it could have been different, are absurd, because what exactly could or should have make them different? There is nothing. There is just a long chain of events from the Big Bang to now, and there is nothing really that could have made those things different, or no reason why those things should have been different. What exactly was supposed to make them different? Doesn't make sense. We will look more into detail because this is the agency issue. Related to the identity, the attachment to the stories of the identity, again, it's like those are obviously just stories. Yes, of course we have a unique point of view on reality, but why do we have to give it specific attributes like it's brave, it's powerful, it's smart, it's unique, it's special? Those are stories we build around this core element of the unique point of view. So when you drop those beliefs, it makes a significant difference in your life. It's not that you are not special, besides what does special even mean? It's that you don't need to be special. You don't need to be different. You don't need to be better. You don't need to be above others. You don't, because why does it even matter? I mean, and above in what sense? Better in what sense? What exactly would be better? If it's just a point of view. Of course, if you believe in the stories, then yes, you may have better stories than someone else, but those are just stories. So once you remove the stories, there is no better. They are just points of view. So related to the identity and attachment, it's the realization that at the end of the day, it's just, yes, point of view plus stories. Once you remove the stories, the point of views are, of course, they are all different, but they are also the same. I mean, they're different because they are different points of view. But it's not that there is a point of view that is better than the other, or more superior, or more inferior, or whatever. So in that part, we remove this idea that our identity is made of stories that we have to defend. It's just a point of view, just like an angle. When you shoot with a camera, you shoot from many angles. And yes, some picture may look better from a certain angle than another one, but again, it doesn't make that angle better in general. So we remove that part. When we drop the stories about identity, we realize they are just stories. By realizing that the core of the identity is just the point of view and everything else is stories. For the desire part, we remove the idea that things could have been different, because what exactly was supposed to make them different anyway? It's ridiculous to believe that there is a part in our brain that is independent from causality, that is immune to the laws of physics, that is immune to causality, and that can take decision based on free will, free from what? Free from causality, free from the laws of physics. That is ridiculous. So when we say this, when we tell ourselves the story that things could have been different or things should have been different, we quickly realize it doesn't make any sense. It's just a long chain of events from the Big Bang to now. There is nothing that could or should have made anything different. So what is left? I mean, there are many sub-stories, but let's look at the third main one, which will be the agency. The agency is really this, is the idea that we are, or we exist, or there is some kind of separate agent. This idea of separation and separation of an agent. So first of all, let's define what separation means. So separation means that there are two things, or three or four or whatever, but separation in general, if you think about it, is really a concept because it's arbitrary. So it's like, what separates Italy and France? There is a border, but it's an arbitrary border. Even if you sit on your chair, what separates your body from the chair? It's kind of arbitrary. It's like if they are touching, but even if they are not touching, let's say what separates you from the house or from the world? It's like you breathe the same oxygen, you eat the food. It's like the atoms go in and out from you and from the earth. So there is no separation. What does separation mean? I mean, there is just one universe and it has a single cause, which is the Big Bang. And there is a continuity of consequence, but those consequences, they don't fork, they don't separate. It's just one big cause that produces one big consequence, that produces another big consequence, as a whole. The whole universe, the idea of separation doesn't make sense. If it was separated, first of all, it will be separated by what? So there will have to be something else that separates the universe. But what is it made of? Because if it's just the universe itself, it's just the universe. Now, if you put your shoes in a box, I mean, those shoes are part of the universe and the box is part of the universe and they all originate from the Big Bang. So the idea of separation is very arbitrary, is very artificial. There is no real separation because separated by what? It will have to be separated by something that is not made of universe. It has to be made of something else. But what is it? The universe, by definition, is everything. So what it will be made of, this thing that separates, it doesn't make sense. There is just the universe, there is just stuff, and that stuff has a single cause, and that single cause has a single consequence, which itself has a single consequence and a single consequence, etc., etc., etc. So it's a continuity from the Big Bang, a single continuity. You cannot fork it or split it in two, because if you wanted to separate it, what exactly will separate it? It will have to be something else that is not the universe that will separate it. The idea is you cannot separate the universe, because with what do you separate it? Of course, you can make arbitrary separation. You can say this galaxy here, this galaxy there, but they are both part of the universe. The separation is arbitrary. They all have the same origin. They all have the same cause, which is the Big Bang. So first, the idea of separation, we realize it's kind of arbitrary. It doesn't really make sense. Then we will also need the idea of agency. So the agent will be something that could make things happen in a different way, because when you do the judgment of the desire, you are imagining that things could have been different. But what exactly could have made them different? I mean, something has to create that difference, has to spark that difference. So if we imagine that there is a single path and it forks in two paths, and one is what happened and one is what could have happened or should have happened, but there has to be something that triggered that event, triggered that fork. Because as far as we understood so far, there is the Big Bang here, it's a single event, and there is single consequences, continuity like a line, and then we are here. So it looks more like a single line. So what exactly could potentially, in theory, have generated that fork, where from that single continuity it forks into two, and there is here what has happened and here what should have happened or could have happened? It will have to be an agent. It will have to be something that is able to break the cycle of the law of causality, cause consequence, basically break the law of physics. This agent should have free will, free and intended as free from the laws of physics, free from causality, free from cause and consequence. It should have absolute independent decision, independent from the laws of physics, independent from causality. So this agent is able to take a free decision. But what does that even mean, that it takes a free decision? How exactly does it do it? It's like, is there something magic where it can take this free decision without relying on anything that has happened before? Because if it relies on what has happened before, then it's just the consequence of what has happened before, which of course is the way it is. That's the most logical. So single event, the Big Bang, continuity of events, one event, one cause produce one consequence, which produce one consequence, one consequence, one consequence, one consequence, one consequence, etc. till now. There is no point where there is an agent that forks it in two because he makes this special or magic independent decision that is independent from causality. He decides, let's do this instead of that, but without in any way relying on what has happened before. It has to be independent, it has to be immune from causality, immune from anything that happened before. That doesn't make any sense. So the idea that there is a separation, even in theory, doesn't make sense. Because what exactly will spark this separation? It will have to be the agent. It will have to be something that is immune from causality. But the agent doesn't make sense. What sense will it make something that is immune from causality? How exactly can it be immune from the laws of physics if it exists within the laws of physics? How can it be immune from causality if it exists within causality? So of course it doesn't make sense. So the idea will be that we kind of believe that we have agency. We believe that we are this special agent that can take decisions in an independent way from the laws of physics, from causality, in an immune way from causality. So this would be equivalent to believing that there is a small box in our brain, a small area in our brain that is protected from the laws of physics, is protected from causality. But of course this is ridiculous. I mean, of course everything is possible in theory, but it really doesn't make sense. It doesn't really fit into anything else we know. So why would we just blindly assume that we have this agency? So we go for, first of all, starting that the idea of separation itself doesn't really make sense. But because if there had to be a separation, it would require an agent that could have made this free decision that is immune, that is independent from causality. And this agent, it doesn't really make sense what it is also, because what exactly is it supposed to be? And then some people we also tend to believe that we are this agent that can make decision immune, in an immune way from the laws of causality. So clearly it doesn't make sense. However, we have a feeling that we are actually making those free decisions. That's why the issue exists. It actually feels like we are freely deciding. Now, beside that, even in psychology, we know that very little is actually decided at the conscious level. It's like most decisions are unconscious, and they can be related to like what we have learned in newspapers or influence of advertising or what we have heard, what we have learned. I mean, at the end of the day, we use certain elements that we have collected over time from our senses and stored in our brain to make decisions. Of course, they don't have to produce a decision immediately. Maybe you collected some information through your eyes and your ears 10 years ago, and you will use it today to make a decision. This is similar to models, like AI use models that have been trained and they collect a lot of information and then eventually it makes a decision. But no one really knows which part is responsible for the decision. It's just a very complex mix of many, many variables that eventually make a decision. Our brains most likely work in the same way. But still, we feel that we are making the decision freely. So what is it? I think the issue is just an issue of wording. It's an issue of semantics. So what exactly are we feeling when we feel we are making this decision as agents? This decision that is immune, that is independent from causality, and we are completely free as in free will, as in free from causality. What exactly it is that gives us that feeling when we make a decision? I will say, and again, that's just my theory, it's just the feeling of hesitation. So yes, sometimes we have to make a complex decision, and it takes some time for our brain to evaluate. Our brain has to maybe collect or process a lot of information, And then he also has to try to imagine the emotional state. Let's say someone is diagnosed with cancer and they have to take an important decision, which is if to take the surgery or not. So on one hand, the doctors say that the doctor offered two options. Option one, they can do the surgery, 50% chance of survival, but if they survive, they are good. Option two, not do the surgery, they will die for sure in 5 years. Now that's a big decision. So 50% chance, if you're lucky, if you do the operation, 50% chance you're good for the rest of your life, or you die on the operating table. Option one, so you decide to do the surgery, it's 50-50. You either make it or you die immediately. Option two, you don't do the surgery, you live those 5 years, but then after 5 years you die. Now, this is a big decision. So the brain will start to process, will start to think, okay, maybe, first he analyzes this, he compares with previous data, but then you will also try to think about the emotional impact. For example, you try to imagine those 5 years. How will you spend those 5 years? And you imagine spending them with your family, with your children, traveling, blah, 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 blah. And you see how it makes you feel. Then you imagine how you will feel if maybe all your family will feel if you were to die immediately during the operation. And then you imagine the feeling of being free from the cancer for the rest of your life. You try to imagine all the scenarios and see how they make you feel. And then you try to compare. And how do we call this? So we could call it free will, but we know it doesn't make sense. Free from what? Free from causality, free from the laws of physics, doesn't make sense. It's really a feeling of hesitation. So I would say, as our brain is processing the information, we are feeling a feeling of hesitation. It's not obvious, it's not clear cut. If someone asks you, would you rather earn $1 million or lose $1 million? There is not much hesitation. It's like, I'd rather make $1 million than lose $1 million. It doesn't take much effort to elaborate this problem. But the one about the cancer surgery is more complicated. It requires time and effort to process it because it's a big deal and there is a lot of information. Especially, you have to try to project the different emotional states based on every outcome and then compare them and try to guess what is the better outcome. So you are feeling hesitation, but really what you are feeling is just this, is just hesitation. So why the feeling of hesitation has to imply the existence of some free will, of some agency, of the ability to make decisions independently and in a way that are immune from causality? It doesn't make sense. It's just a feeling of hesitation. Yes, of course, sometimes we can make very complex decisions that are going to consider many variables, many parameters, project different emotional state of different outcomes. So when you decide if you rather make $1 million or lose it, it's easy. You think $1 million happy, lose $1 million sad, you go for happy. But when it's more complicated, then you have to make many thoughts and you do one thought that produce another thought, produce another thought, produce another thought. You end up building a very long chain of thoughts. And while your brain is processing that long chain of thoughts, you feel that you are hesitating. You have a feeling of hesitation. That's what you're feeling. But does that mean that you're actually deciding something? The fact that you're hesitating, does it mean that something is actually being decided for real, as in free agency, as in outside of causality? Probably not.